Hey Melissa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Adam.
Good. Well, so you and I have been discussing, at great length recently about a few topics. It seems like we're seeing companies that are coming to us and they've had bad experiences with AI, or they're struggling to implement AI across their enterprise organization, get adoption. Maybe they get stuck in the POC phase. They can't actually get it to market, right? So they're struggling and they've had bad experiences, failed projects. And there's a few key things kind of that we've been seeing, right? About these implementations and why they might be failing. So one major issue is kind of around the data. The second is around needing the AI systems to fit into their processes that they already have in place or their tool stack they already have in place. And third, they just don't really know how to calibrate success, right? They don't know what's working, what's not. They feel out of control, right? And so we can kind of take those one by one, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. So when it comes to this data piece, companies not having data, AI ready data. Can you break down like what AI ready data looks like and why that's so crucial for business success in the enterprise with AI implementations?
So I absolutely can, but I think first of all, I want to back up for a minute because I think what happened was is we all woke up one day and Chat GPT was here and everybody went out and played with it and we were all just completely amazed at what you could go ask and get an answer back. And
Mm,
then the next thing you know, it was Gen AI. And so there became this race for businesses to adopt AI. And even myself, right? The first thing I said was, how can we take this new technology, make sure that it's and do it in a safe way, make sure that we're being compliant and we're making the right decisions around it. But how can we use this to really automate processes? And so what happened was there was a race for companies to adopt AI, right? Gen AI in particular. And so
mhm,
a lot of because of the pressure in the marketplace and everybody wanted to, be able to say, hey, we're using AI. I think people didn't do the right due diligence. What I mean by that is
mm,
they didn't really take the time to understand the company's capabilities. Because truth was, there was a lot of companies out there saying we can do this, we can do that, when in reality they couldn't. They were still trying to figure
mm,
it out themselves. So people signed contracts with companies. They made selections without really doing the normal process because everybody was in a race to be first to
yeah.
market, or they didn't want to be last, that's for sure. And so you had companies that jumped in and said, let's take a look at this and see how we can make this work within our infrastructure without doing the normal processes of really figuring out the impact it was going to have.
Mm,
And what happened was is that you had people that went out there and tried to deploy it and failed. And so
mhm,
now they're gun shy, right? So they're scared to go out there and try to implement a solution because there was failure on the first. So one of the things that we've seen significantly is that the data. So one is
mm,
if your data is not clean and it's not accurate, then when it pulls information back, it's not going to be accurate. So helping companies understand that it's important to have accurate data that's being utilized when they're building these models to be used, right? The other thing is where is that data coming from? Because you may have multiple data sources, multiple systems that you got to pull from, and they're all going to be set up different. And the way that
mm,
they're set up and the structure of that data is going to be different. So having a company that can bring it all together, make sense of it, and make sure that the accurate answer is being pulled from that data right and given to a consumer or to employee according to how you're using it, it's super important. And so companies did not realize the importance of that foundational base of the knowledge. And was it accurate? Where is it being pulled from? How is it being organized? How is it being put together so that when a customer, an employee, or whatever it may be, ask a question that they're getting accurate information? Really good example of that is a major airline that I fly with all the time. I mean, you can go ask them, can I, take a pet on an airplane? And after it talks to me about suitcases and rebooking tickets and anything but a pet, you realize very quickly just how important it is to have that foundational knowledge base and make sure that the information is organized in a way where that when you ask a question, you're actually getting the answer back to the question that you ask.
Yeah, that's a really great example. You mentioned kind of current systems, current data structures, and things like that. As mentioned in the challenge that I think we're coming up against is enterprises have existing solutions, has invested a lot of money in the infrastructure that they have, the tools that they have in place, and they really want their AI partners or their AI systems
Absolutely.
to fit into that. They don't want to have to go back to the drawing board, recreate their systems just to take, again, a pretty high risk move right now to um, implement AI in different areas across organizations. So how are they thinking about that, and how are AI providers going to have to approach this to be able to partner with companies to craft these right-sized solutions that aren't just appropriate for helping them meet their strategic business objectives, but also integrating and playing nicely with their systems?
Well, I think, first of all, as a CEO, anytime one of my leaders comes to me and says, "Oh, you know what, I picked the wrong system," the first thing I said was, "Well, great. Wish you'd have figured that out, 100,000, $1 million earlier." Right. So, number one, I tell everyone first of all, if you've got a vendor telling you you need to repeal everything and replace it with their solution, keep talking. Go look at someone else. Because when
Mm,
people come to us, the first thing we say to them is, let's understand what you're trying to accomplish. What process are you trying to automate? What problem, what challenge are you trying to solve? What are the things that are not working right? Because every time we have sat with a potential customer and asked them, like, okay, what are you struggling with? Why is this not doing what you need it to do? There may be one or two components that's working okay. And what happens is when you're able to work with that customer and really embrace the part that is working and solve the part that is not, then number one, you build a great relationship, but then you also have a foundation to expand that relationship into many different areas of the business. So one is, we tell people to panic. You do not have to replace everything. You don't have to walk into your boss and tell him, hey, I just basically blew $500,000 or $1 million or more sometimes because we picked the wrong vendor and they can't deliver what they said they could. And so we teach our customers, first of all, let's really identify what you're trying to accomplish. And every day I wake up and there's a new word that's being used in AI. Agentic AI now and domain specific AI. Like every day there's something new. And so I tell people, don't get caught up in the hype. There's like 3 or 4 steps that you need to take. One is, what are you trying to solve? Are you trying to automate a process? Are you trying to solve a problem? Are you trying to make it easier for your customer to do business with you? Are you trying to provide service 24/7? Like, identify what you're trying to accomplish and then go find a provider that can meet your needs and does not make you fit in their box. If you've got to
mm,
change to do business with them, you're talking to the wrong vendor. You need
yeah.
to find someone who will really co-innovate and what I call process automation. We automate processes right now. We use all these great tools that are out there, agentic AI, and all these other things that are available to us. But we have a large toolbox that we can utilize to help automate that process within your current environment. Because if you start changing things for your employees or your customers, it
Mm,
really costs you more money. It costs frustration, and you risk losing a customer or you risk losing an employee because of frustration of having to relearn a process. And so
mm,
we always tell our potential customers or customers, like, we should work within your environment and not force you to adapt to ours. And that's what's so amazing about AI. The other thing is that we always work with our financial institutions and our highly regulated industries. You're still trying to figure out, how do you really adapt AI and do it in a safe way that is not going to cause harm to your customers and also is going to meet the requirements of regulators and your auditors. And so having a solution that gives you the tools to be able to address that within your organization makes it easy to do business with us. And I think that's super important. I
Mm,
come from a background of fraud and risk. My brother and I, Merlin, started a company called GaiaX Systems, and we served financial institutions and highly regulated institutions. And so we come from that background, understanding how important it is to be compliant, to be able to give you the tools that's necessary to meet the requirements of regulators and auditors. And so I think that's also important to understand and realize, because I think you're going to see more regulation come down in the next few years. Probably in the next 12 months, we're going to see more. And do you have a solution that can meet those requirements and make the adjustments as new requirements are rolled out? Or are you going to have to repeal and replace again? And I think that's why it's so important that you slow down and
yeah.
understand, first of all, what you're trying to accomplish. And number two, have you selected someone that can grow with you and can adapt to the change? And that's critically important.
Yeah, I think a lot of really good stuff there, and I think a lot of it is around choosing the right partner to help you de-risk the decision, right? To de-risk the investment. And we've been thinking a lot about this, and even made some decisions over the last few quarters of adapting even the way we think about pricing to help companies lower the barriers to entry to say, hey, you had a bad experience over here, but we want to prove value first. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the shift that we've made to make it easier and lower the barriers to entry to actually start rolling out AI in your enterprise?
Sure. So one of the companies that came to us, I mean, I've done business with them before, and they had spent, almost $1 million rolling out a solution that literally did not work. In fact, they had to pull it back because it was causing them more problems with their customers and causing them it was more calls were coming in because customers were irritated because it was causing friction. And so they said, Melissa, like, for us to go spend another $1 million, like, there's no way. If I go to my leader and say that, I'm going to get fired. Like, I'm not going to have a
Exactly.
job. And I was like, no, that's insane. Like, I understand where you're coming from. So we started thinking about, like, not just customers that are dealing that have tried to roll out a solution and it's not giving them the what they needed, the relief that they needed, or it's not giving them the savings, and it's actually caused them more problems. We started thinking about, like, how is this market going to look 12 months from now, 24 months from now? And what we heard from the analysts at Gartner and Forrester and a lot of these different experts out in the field is that the market is moving towards consumption pricing, which I'm a huge fan of. We did it in my past life in fraud and risk, because it basically says you're going to pay for what you use, right? And I always worry when somebody comes to me and a vendor says, I needed, $250,000 up front. I'm sitting there thinking, like, do you think we're going to fail? Like, is your product not going to work? If it's going to work, like, why can't I pay you for what I use? And so I think, we look at this very differently to say, listen, we're going to have a minimum risk up front. So our entry point is very low to our competitors, because we want you to get on our platform. Because one, we know our platform works. We know we can deliver it in many languages across the world. We do it currently now. We've done it for years, right? We started in Spain, and I like to say we work from the outside in instead of starting in the US and then working our way out. So we have many years delivering solutions in many languages across the world, and do it very natively. So it's not like we sound like we're an American trying to talk Italian, right? It's in the native language. So we know that it's going to work. We can deliver it in multiple languages. That when a customer asks a question, whether it be on search, whether it be on a voice bot or it be on a text bot, that they're going to get the answer to the question. It's not going to be like, hey, here's 10 things, hope we got it right. It's actually going to ask the question. And what's so amazing about what we have been able to do is not only can we answer that question, but then talking about agentic AI, we can then continue to drive them towards success. And what I mean by that is we can have a very human-like conversation that flows back and forth. For example, if you look at our HR agent, you could literally say, I could say, how many hours of vacation do I have left? Oh, I have 40. Would you like to schedule vacation? Right? So I'm asking the next question, which becomes a human like conversation. If I was talking to someone in HR, that would be the next question. Do you need help setting it up? So it gives you the ability to be able to have that conversational, whether it be through voice or through text, in the language that you feel comfortable with, and being able to solve all your problems around HR, whether you want to look at benefits, maybe you're going to have surgery, whatever it is, you can do all those functions within one interaction, which I think is really important, because then you're satisfied as an employee. You feel like that company cares about you because you didn't have to spend massive time getting your question answered and being able to schedule something. So there's things like that we know. Basically, we treat people how we want to be treated. And I want to be treated extremely well. And, I told my husband the other day, every time I call certain companies, it's like I have to watch myself so I don't say bad words, because it's so frustrating because they can't give you the answer you want. They send you and transfer you to 10 different people, and you never solve the problem, and you get off the phone an hour later and absolutely nothing has happened. The same happens with a lot of these bots that are in the marketplace or searches. Like, you go in there, you try to have a conversation, and you end up so ticked off that it gives you a bad image of what that process should even look like. And so
Mhm.
I think that's why when people do it right, they take the time to really think about what they're trying to accomplish. They think about and make sure that the data they're feeding into it is accurate and correct, and that they are able to consolidate all the different data points, right? And be able to bring it together so that it makes sense, and then have it where not only can it help the customer with one issue, but solve all the problems with one interaction. That's when it's magic. And it's amazing the experience that can be driven, and the customer satisfaction comes from that interaction.
Yeah, 100%. And there's something to be said about wanting to lead with value. And we're saying, as a vendor, we're willing to take on some of that risk for you by
Absolutely.
by proving the value first, and then partnering with you to co-innovate, to co-develop, to craft the right size solution for you for the long term, right? And so it's all
Right.
about leading with success. And so, you know, um, as AI in general in the year 2025, 26 begins to move from experimentation phase into kind of operationalization, let's say,
Right.
like, we've seen this works. Now we have to systematically scale this across the enterprise, and we have to look into our processes and uh, while measuring the impacts, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
can relate because you're an executive, right?
Yes.
But what
Yeah.
should leaders be looking at, right? And what should leaders try to be understanding, like, or how should they be approaching it to say, hey, this is working, this is not, and then inform how they measure success and how they validate the effectiveness of the AI, and then how
Mhm.
they use that as a framework or a mechanism to then allocate more investment, more time into what is actually working.
Right. So I think number one, you have to know what you're trying to solve and what you're trying to accomplish. And not just for today, but you got to look into the future and say, where do I want to be in 12 months, 24 months from now? Because I tell everyone, if you're just trying to be reactive instead of proactive, you're going to lose at the AI game. So one is, where do you want to be? So you've got to know where you're headed as a company. You've got to understand your goals. And then yes, you have to address the issues that are in front of you, but ultimately you want to look and say, where do I need this to be 12 months from now? So I think that's really important to understand. Number two, to make sure that you have your team on board. Make sure that the stakeholders understand it. So when you go to work and you implement the actual solution, that you have the team working towards one goal. I think it's also understand to really grasp that even if you roll out a solution, by the time you implement it, there's going to be a new name, a new solution, and everybody's going to be talking about something new, and you're going to have a little bit of a panic attack saying, oh my gosh, like I just spent. That's why it's critically important that you pick the right vendor. And let me tell you why it's so critically important is you need a company that is agile, that is focused on innovation, is spending money on innovation, and they have a proven track record of being able to bring products to the market that work and are effective. And if they're not, move on. And sometimes people will say, oh, because of the big name, that's the company. I will tell you from my experience, I've worked corporate America for almost 17 years before I actually went into the entrepreneur world. most smaller companies can move much faster than a larger company because it takes so much more to be able just to make a decision, to be able to talk about making a change. And so by the time they get through talking about it, a small company's already done it and has 10 customers up. That's the difference. The problem with small companies is you need to make sure that that leadership understands what is necessary to be effective, because a lot of times if they don't have the operational skills and experience and have actually run a company and understand what it takes, what happens is sometimes you'll get solutions that don't effectively accomplish what you needed to do. They don't understand the scope and the importance of certain things. And so I think that's why, it's so important to ask the right questions, to understand. And if all of a sudden you got to fit in their box, then you have the wrong
Mm,
vendor, because
yeah,
AI is agile, and the solution should be agile. And if it's not, then they're not going to keep you up with the ever changing landscape of AI. And so
yeah.
I tell customers all the time, like, by the time you implement this, something else will be new. So stay focused, understanding that as AI changes, your partner should change also to keep you making sure that you're able to consume and use all the latest techniques, right, that can empower you, but also be able to be an expert. I remember when Gen AI first rolled out, my team was in a panic mode. They came running into my office like, oh, we got to get out, everybody's out. And I was like, we're going to do it right, because we have customers that depend on us and trust us. These are financial institutions. And so we will not roll our solution out until I know it can it works the way we say it's going to, and we can deliver it in a very clear, concise manner that gives companies the visibility, right? And the ability to show where the data is coming from, and they can answer questions if they need to their auditors or to regulators, and they can clearly document how it works. I will tell you, a lot of companies wrote solutions out and it failed miserably. And companies were very unhappy because they had made promises and it didn't work. And I will tell you, from just the years of my experience, it's much better to take your time and do it right than come out as first in line and fail and disappoint your customers. So I think it's really important that you understand your goals, and then also too, make sure that you educate your team and you talk about cost. Sometimes the cheapest is not always the best. Sometimes it is, right? But understand the long-term costs. I always worry, especially in this environment, if people wants to charge a huge amount up front, unless you're doing massive customization, and then that's based on the hours that you're utilizing. But unless you're doing massive customization, why are they charging you that huge amount up front? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because there's a chance they think you're not going to consume what you say you are, or they're a little bit concerned that it may not work. And so I would say, always ask the tough questions. And I do it myself. Anytime we're going to bring AI in, one is we test it and we always ask the tough questions. And then I think more importantly is, when you're looking at success, go back to what you said up front. What were you trying to solve? And what were the success points that you identify? Because every time we do a project and someone brings me some to look at, I always say, what does success look like? Like, what do they need to accomplish to feel like we've done a good job? A lot of times, what's amazing, Adam, is a customer will say, oh, if I can get to 85% accuracy because they have a subpar solution, and they'll be happy. And I'm like, gee whiz, I wouldn't, because I'm trying to get 95 or 98. So a lot of times we overperform and they're extremely happy just right out of the box. But the point is, identify up front, like, what do you need to accomplish, and what does success look like? Because if not, it moves as you go through the project, and then you can have a situation where they just keep wanting more because AI continues to develop.
Oh, sorry. It's on mute there. Yeah, 100%. So when you think about time horizons as an executive, like, leaders in companies, everybody's allocated budget. Uh, they're looking to their teams to deliver value through AI. They need to go find solutions. They need to go implement solutions. And I think some of the reason we've seen some of these projects fail is just misaligned time horizons on the value that is expected to be seen. Um, you know, can enterprise leaders be looking to see value in the first quarter or two out of their solutions, or how should they be approaching it? Like, I've been thinking about this a lot, and obviously we need to be planning for the long term, right? Um, Getting quick wins so we can prove the value of the solutions, and that's our goal as a vendor and as an AI provider, right? But how does that kind of contrast, or how does that dichotomy that and the balance that you have to strike between immediate impact across the organization versus setting up the long-term infrastructure for success 2, 3, 5 years from now? Because that's not always the same thing, and there might be a balance that you have to strike there. As you said, things are moving so fast, and you have to not only be thinking about short-term impact, but setting up the infrastructure for long-term impact.
So first of all, I want to kind of address something you said up front. I find that a lot of people are what I call frozen because they're so scared of the failure they've already had trying to use AI. They're scared to even get started. So they find themselves continuing to want to, re-engage, 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 re-engage. And finally you have to say like, hey, it's kind of like you say, if you marry someone that's been married before, like, I'm not going to be held responsible, for your, your ex's failures. You almost got to say like, hey, I'm sorry that company failed you. I am not going to be responsible for their failures. We are not going to fail you. Like, you can go ask people that we've done business with, which are now doing business with us in the second company. Like, we will not fail you. I'll give you my cell phone number. Like, if you need to talk, I will talk to you, because I think it's important to build that confidence. We want our customers to look at us as a trusted advisor, a trusted partner, right? So we're willing to put the time in. But I think it's really important to understand that sometimes the savings doesn't move at the same pace as AI is moving, right? So it's really dependent on the use case. So if, let's say, it's going to be a use case where you're a bank and you're taking customer service calls, and incorporate some of our digital demos, or you incorporate a search, or you update your search where it's working more effectively, your chatbot or voice bot, you're going to see immediate impact, because you're not going to have calls coming into your call center. You're not going to have to hire so many agents. There's going to be consistency in the information, so you're going to make people happy. You're going to retain that customer. And I can tell you, people will say, oh, customers aren't going to leave a bank because of not getting information. Wrong. I literally just moved and closed out one of my major bank accounts that I've had for years because they couldn't answer a simple question for me. And I thought, you know what, if this was an emergency and I could not get done what I needed, that would be a problem for me. So I literally moved all of my money, investments and everything, to another bank for that reason. So it is about customer retention. And so you're going to see immediate impact. If you're actually putting in an employee agent, right, where it's going to combine and make it an easy flow for your employees, then the impact, the savings, you may not be able to see immediately, but you're going to see better satisfaction on your employees. You're going to see, instead of Melissa spending 2 hours trying to find an answer to a question and then being able to complete a task, I'm spending 15 minutes, so I'm giving you back an hour and 45, right? Where I'm actually working and contributing to that company's success. So that savings is not going to expose itself or be seen, right, as quick as, let's say, if you're actually lowering the number of calls. We had a major bank that had a problem with people resetting passwords and sending to Zelle. Now, I know that sounds crazy because you're like, everybody knows how to do it. Well, guess what? No, they don't. And so they incorporated one of our Learn Digital demos, and it saved hundreds of thousands of calls every month. So that's real savings that you can
Wow.
recognize
Yeah.
immediately. And so those are the kind of solutions that you can really say, wow, look at what we've saved and those impact. Some of those, like with an employee agent, you may not see immediately, but over time, it saves millions of dollars because it allows the employee to do what you hired them to do, right? It allows them to do the function and get it done and be more productive. So there's some savings that you don't see immediately, but it's critically important. And over a long period of time, it saves you millions of dollars.